criticism, at least for me, I know not everybody feels this way, it's buzz with weight, right? It's not just some guy saying that blah, 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 blah. It's someone who has trained in this field and knows what they're talking about and is being paid to write something telling you, hey, this book is good or bad or interesting in this way, or the art is really cool. But there is a benefit, because the more people who know about your stuff, the more likely there are going to be people who can be reading your stuff. And that's also how we learn about books now. Like, we don't have, you were talking about earlier, there's no centralized place to promote. We don't have comics Twitter anymore. Comics Twitter is dead. Yeah. And so how do we find out about the stuff? People have to talk about it on their sites or their newspapers or on Blue Sky or wherever people are. And enough people do, like, let's say 5 people you trust mention the book. You're like, okay, this is going on my to be read pile.
Hi, this is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly chat that we have with the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry to get to know what it is that they know that you can use for your business or career in comics. This week we are talking to writer, critic, and editor Tiffany Babb, one of the sharpest voices working at the intersection of comics, culture, and business, and baseball. Tiffany's work has appeared in outlets such as the AV Club, Paste, the Comics Journal, and her own publication that she's doing now called the Comics Courier, a print newspaper dedicated to the thoughtful comics criticism, where she collaborates with a range of some of my favorite writers to explore the medium in depth. I've been looking forward to this one, and we had trouble our first time out. Like
we did.
It was, I don't even remember now all the problems I was having. There was power, I don't even remember now what all was going on. As I remember, there were people that came to the door in the middle of it. It was a day. Anyway, thanks for coming back, Tiffany. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very good. We're going to dig deep into some of the things that you've done in the past, but you have such a unique relationship with, our greatest American art form and our greatest American pastime. I wanted to begin this conversation just in that intersection. I'd like to come back to it a little bit later, but to begin with, what can baseball learn from the comics industry? What is it that we do well that they would do better to do well?
That's very interesting. Well, I think they're already starting to do it. Not baseball specifically, but obviously we've seen Lance Festerman and Mike Armstrong start their Fanatics Fest, leaving Reed Pop and doing this big sports convention. And I think that's something, sports culture, fan culture in sports is so hardcore, and there really hasn't been a space for kind of our type of fandom, I guess, in that place where people dress up, people go and they, do fun things and share their love and go listen to people talk on panels. And I went to Fanatics Fest last year to check out what they've been doing. And it does feel like a Comic-Con. It's in the Javits Center, of course. And so I think that's something, which is just being able to connect people beyond just the games.
Yeah, and Lance and Mike came from Reed Pop. Lance Festerman's really the reason that New York Comic Con is what it is. It's such a massive juggernaut, and that is because of those two gentlemen. It was fascinating to see them move into the sports space away from this, because I thought they were lifers. It was it was shocking to see that.
It was.
Yeah. Do you think that is there room inside of, what sort of narratives? I'm not a baseball guy. I'm not a sports guy, really. So is there room for the sort of intersection of the kind of business, but also larger narratives? Like, I'm thinking about how professional wrestling really kind of lives in that same space that comics does, of these overarching narratives where there are good guys and bad guys, and you have these long form. Is there in that kind of space in baseball? Do they have those kinds of conversations about those those dramas and those narratives?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as clear cut as in wrestling because it's not, written, but there throughout the season, like there's kind of like, oh, well, this is the upcoming guy. This is the guy everyone wants to beat. Here's the guy who's an a-hole.
Yeah.
And you do have kind of, they call it the story, right? It's like, what's the story this season? Like, what's going on? What are the big beats? And I think that that can even happen during a single game, but usually, like, you think about it in the season and you get, this is like the fun part of rooting for a team, is you get really invested in your team, your guys, and what they're doing and who's really struggling or who's doing really well. And it is very much storytelling still, even though it's not scripted.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. So you're watching their career as its own narrative.
Yeah.
Much that happens in our world, it's interesting that we don't really dig deep into we see a lot of people's personal lives, like creators talking about their personal views and that sort of thing in social media, but we don't really dig deep into, like, I know where many of the creators I know live, but I don't know much about their families or their interests outside of comics. Is that does that sort of thing perpetuate?
It does.
This entire podcast is not going to be about baseball.
No,
it
definitely, it definitely does. Like, we have, like, people will follow, like, Shohei Ohtani has a dog named Decoy, and people are really invested in this dog. Or some people have their families kind of more in the spotlight. Some people don't, which I totally get because fans are fans.
Yeah.
And especially with the gambling thing, things have gotten really kind of out of hand with, like, people like attacking, like kind of going after people's families. But no, it is. And because they're real people, like, I'm not really one to kind of look into people's families, but I know there's a lot of wives who, like, have Instagram accounts and, like, share what the kids are eating or something. And people are really engaged with that, which is just like, oh, here's, like, the inner life of, one guy that I do follow outside of the sport is Ozzy Albies, is a fish guy. Like, he has this really expensive collection of fish. I know nothing about fish, but he has, like, a huge, like, gajillion gallon tank in his garage that he got custom built with, like, these rare fish in it. And that kind of stuff, like, you get the sense of kind of a personality outside of the game as well. And then some guys are much more private, like Mike Trout, who is this big superstar, like, doesn't really have this kind of public persona. Some people really lean into it, some people don't.
Wow, fascinating. All right. Well, see, maybe I should be watching more baseball. I don't know. Tell us about what does your day-to-day look like? Because I know that we're talking about, I know that you have the interest in baseball, but I want to hear more about what your actual pursuits are and what are the projects that you're working on, say, this week?
Yeah. Well, it's widely varied because I'm a freelancer. So this is kind of how the sausage gets made for people who have never worked freelance. In December, you get very little work. Yeah. Because it's the end of people's yearly budgets. So I don't have a ton of assigned work this month. And so I'm kind of doing extra courier work. I have that baseball site, the Fan Files, where I'm publishing stuff weekly. But because the courier is shipping out next month, I do have to put in all the orders for the mailers, the little sleeves the prints go in, the bookmarks, the catalog, the paper itself. Like, I just ordered the proofs last week. It looks very good. Haas Otzman El How has designed this issue. I designed the last two. I'm not a designer. So I was like, what's the best I can do to make this look semi-professional? And then Haas, like, who has actual design skills, comes in and he's just like, is this okay? And I'm just like, that is, like, better than my, like, wildest dreams. Like, I could never make that if I tried a million years. So it looks great. But this week, a lot of the stuff is working on Courier and then prepping for the next issue of the Courier, which is starting to reach out to writers, starting to reach out to interviews, print artists. It's 4 months in the future, but because of the holiday, it's really like 2 months because people completely flake in December. Oh, so there's all that.
I know we're working on a kind of similar project, and it means working with people who work in offices, and it's remarkable that nothing seems to get done in the month of December. We're busy working. I'm here every day.
Yes.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's they get real short timer disease right this time of year. It's
absolutely. Time changes.
Indeed. In our previous attempt at this, we did dig a little deeper into your bio, and then I, in preparation for this second attempt, I did a whole lot of a little bit more deep dive into some of the interviews that you've done, and you've talked a lot about your history of getting started in comics, specifically like falling in love with comics in college, and then getting to write about it almost immediately. I think because of your college work. I wanted to talk a little more about how your bio has like panel by panel magazine, which I think it was online, Popverse. Obviously, you're doing the Comics Courier. At what point did you realize that writing about comics was going to be such a big part of your professional life, as opposed to just something that you did to get through a class or get through, something you enjoyed, right?
That's a good question. I don't know if I ever made that like shift on purpose. I am just really obsessive. Okay. And you can probably tell this with like, I got into baseball like 3 years ago and now I run a baseball site.
Yeah.
And so when I got into comics, it's just like, all I do is comics. I was going to the shop and getting quarter books, like quarter floppies, and just getting them stack by stack and just reading through the stack. Didn't matter what order, didn't matter what series. I was just trying to learn the language and absorb as much information as I could to understand how to read comics, because it's not, we always tell people to just jump into any issue, which is totally a way to do it. But like even reading comics can be difficult when you're starting out. I think like middle grade graphic novels do a really good job of this, which is like the language is much easier to jump into. Like you could have never read a comic and pick up Smile and it makes sense. Whereas like some superhero comics are laid out kind of funny and you're not going to be able to make it through the same way until you kind of pick up that language. And so that's what I was doing at the time in college, and I was reading and writing. And then for me, it's just like, well, what else? And you just kind of keep layering things on. Where else can I write? Where else can I publish? Where else can I meet people, connect with people? And then all of a sudden it's a big part of your professional life.
So few, I can only imagine, so few people that none of the people that I've spoken to, and I cannot imagine there are many of you out there that have, you have published work, as we mentioned, about baseball. You currently work, that is part of your freelance
kind
budget,
of,
right?
Kind of. I'm not making money off the baseball site. I'm making like pennies, I guess, if you're counting that, like AffiliaLinks. But like, I'm not really making money off of it. It's really part of that thing where it's just like, what else can I do? What else can I do? And then maybe someday it leads somewhere. Maybe someday it doesn't.
Let's talk about the Comics Courier then. So let's just jump straight to that, because it is something that I loved and was inspired by. We did a roundtable on this podcast with you about, I think we gave it the cheeky title of how print will save digital. And somebody later said, that's not what this was about. I'm like, have you never heard? Clickbait, I get it. The whole point is to ask you to watch the thing. But yeah, what makes you in this day and age want to sit down and put something on paper that people have to sit and focus on and read in order to interact with it? It's so antithetical to the attention spans that we've all been developing over the last decade. It's so antithetical to how we think about our culture that we consume. Like what grasped you to make you do this? And now you're several issues in. What keeps you going on that?
I think for me it's two-pronged. One, the first prong is that I don't like to, I'm on my computer all day for work. Like at the end of the day, if I'm sitting down to read, I don't want to pull up my phone or my computer. I want to read a book or magazine or newspaper. And so I'm like, there must be someone like me out there, right, who wants the physical object. That, and then also it's a way to differentiate the project from other stuff, right? There's a ton of other comic sites doing really great stuff out there. But if I wanted to launch something new, I needed not a gimmick, because it's beyond a gimmick. It's very, I think the project itself, the ethos is tied to the physicality of the medium as well, which is we're writing stuff that's kind of out of the news cycle, stuff that's made to be read separately from kind of the reviews you're reading online. It's hopefully a more thoughtful process when people sit down and read the Courier than scrolling through your phone. But also it's like a newspaper. You get to do newspaper font, and marketing wise, like it's kind of a fun thing. Like nobody else, I mean, other people are doing newspaper format stuff, but this is kind of our opportunity to say, hey, this is the newspaper one. And then it does stick because people don't ask me like, how's the thing? They say, how's the paper? Right.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that's helped. But a lot of it is both of that. I like physical media, but also how do we set this project as like aside from everything else?
It's interesting. I realized as I was opening up a couple copies that I have here and reading them, you talk about how there's this sort of cognitive shift you have to have in order to read comics, right? You have to understand the language of comics. And it was surprising to me as someone who grew up as a Gen X kid. I read, physical media for most of my life before there were ever screens in my daily life. And so I read daily newspapers for many years, and yet picking up yours and like having to unfold it and then turn pages and kind of manipulate it in order to read it, that was such an interesting cognitive shift that I haven't done in so long. I'm curious to know, how much of your thought process in how you lay it out? You talked about the design of working with a designer. I don't know if it was as before or after we started recording, but you talked about that. How much of that goes into your thinking in the layout of this? Because you're really speaking an old language again, right?
Yeah. When I started, I was doing the layouts myself, and I just bought like off used books, whatever website. I bought like 3 guides to laying out newspapers. And it's funny because they're like written in the time of like early computers. So all the programs are like super out of date and all the images are really like wonky, but like the languages are still the same. They're like, this is how many columns you can fit on a page. This is the font size. This is kind of what your headline should look like. And I literally just like followed the rules. Now what Haas is doing this time is being very cool. Like panel by panel looked beautiful, and he did such a good job of that, and it had this magazine feel, and he's really kind of taken on the newspaper feel for this one, and he's much more bold because he's much more brave than I am, because he actually knows what he's doing. Like I'm like, oh, let's put on the bumper rails, and he's just like, oh, well, I can make this look really cool. So he's done an incredible job, but I think that's also like we're very much leaning into the idea of old-timey newspapers. Like it's not like this is a cool, sleek, modern thing. We want kind of the old font. We want this old-fashioned style because the aesthetic is cool, and like people have these memories around it. At least I'm sure there's some super young reader who's just like, I've never seen a newspaper in my life, but most of us have like memories of reading newspapers and being able to that's why like I put a puzzle in each one, a newspaper type puzzle, like a crossword or a word search, because it's like that's part of the newspaper experience as well.
Yeah, it's and this other project that we're working on, this idea of going back and seeing all of the old tools, all of the old ways that we used to interact with print that just have gone away. Right? What my personal obsession is with classified ads. I think that they were just such a cool piece. It's almost like it's almost like Twitter, but but where you're charged by the word. I don't know. It's a fascinating thing that we haven't as a generation, we don't really have these skills. I'm just imagining my 11-year-old trying to figure out how to read a newspaper. I mean, he's just, what do I do with this? This is that's I can only imagine. Well, it's fascinating. How have people been embracing it? I mean, obviously people now know about the newspaper, but what sort of response have you been hearing as outside of your crowdfund? Like, have you been hearing about people discovering and interacting with it?
It's been cool. I really love when people get the paper and they take a picture of themselves reading it somewhere. I think I'm always just like, that is, because that's the whole thing. Is like you're at a cafe and you're reading your newspaper instead of like doing stuff on your phone. It's that to me is really satisfying. It's also been really great. Like I table at zine fests and stuff, so it's been really great to have people come up and say, "Hey, like I've heard about this." And I'm just like, that's so satisfying because we don't. I mean, I do the Kickstarter, but beyond that, like we're not publishing online, so it's not like someone could have been linked an article and find out that way. So like I guess the word of mouth is so much weirder than stuff that I normally work on, which is usually quite internet based. Yeah. So it's really cool to have people know what it is, especially because it is new. It's like a year old now, and it's most like I'm working with really amazing people, but it's mostly me and now Haas. And so it's just like, you're working on something by yourself for a year and then it's like, oh, someone's heard of it. That's like a stranger who I've never met has heard of it or loves it or is a fan or something, which like at San Diego Comic-Con this year, a couple people came up to me who I didn't know. And I was like, this is very satisfying because especially like in our work, it's not like nobody writes reviews on criticism, right?
Right.
So you're not getting that kind of feedback necessarily. So just to hear that people are reading it is really nice.
This is a podcast about the business of comics, about the industry of comics. So let's talk about your initial business hypothesis. You discussed, kind of a little bit. I want to hear a bit more about why the Comics Courier as print criticism newspaper. Who did you think was going to be the paying customer going into this? And has that matched reality so far? Have there been any surprises?
I will tell you like my cynical point of view.
Sure.
My very cynical point of view is like, this is going to be my friends. And then people like colleagues that I know who have to support the project because like I've supported their projects. And I was like, well, people have to show up. Like I've been doing this for a long time and, they'll have to support it out of like guilt. Which I'm sure people have because, we've all been there. Yeah. And I really appreciate that support no matter where it comes from emotionally. Yeah. But no, a lot of people have found it. People I don't know, people who aren't normally in like with comics criticism, they're kind of the people who read your work and not necessarily that they follow your work, but they read the places where you publish because of the tone. Like certain websites publish certain types of criticism and people gravitate to those circles. So I assumed that the people, and to be fair, there are a lot of people who were huge panel by panel readers who have moved to reading the Courier because I'm involved and Haas is involved. And then a lot of the writers are involved as well, which has been nice. Yeah. But there's also people who like aren't reading these places or like have never read comics criticism before but are comics fans, which has been really interesting. People like who I've never met who just aren't in those circles, who found us either through Kickstarter or word of mouth, and that's been really cool, which is just like it's not like a giant viral audience, but it's hitting people and people are liking it who aren't necessarily who I thought would be the target audience.
Yeah. Okay. So then in many, from what I hear you saying is people are actually discovering the idea of criticism.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is weird. Like, that's not something that I was setting out to do, right? I wasn't like, let's show people that like people are writing about comics kind of in depth. Yeah. But some people didn't know and are finding it this way, which is really amazing.
So let's for the audience, let's talk about what is the difference. How do you see the difference between, say, review or criticism or, just hype? Other forms of writing about comics? What makes comics criticism the kind of stuff that you're focusing in on for the Comics Courier? What is it that what value does that bring? Where?
So criticism, which in my mind includes reviews, but I do often think of reviews as different than long form, but we do publish reviews. Criticism for me, what separates it from hype is that, and I get this all the time because people do want comics criticism to hype comics. Sure. People want comics criticism to support the comics industry. And while there are people out there who do that stuff, like for me as a critic, it's not my job to hype anything. It's not my job to support an industry, to push things forward. My job is to be honest to my reader and to share my point of view and back it up with like logic and interesting thoughts. So that to me is the difference between kind of being nice about people's work. Like there's a lot of people who just don't think you should write negative reviews of comics. And I find that kind of, it might work for some people, but for me, like if I never wrote a negative review, that would mean that I'm just not being honest.
Sure.
Like if I read a comic ready to review it and it's bad and I don't cover it, like I'm not doing my job. So that's kind of what I keep in mind. And then in general, I'm not a huge review person now, writing wise. I mostly write long form. And the difference for me beyond length, some people do a great job of deep analysis in like 500 words. But for me, long form usually has something else to say beyond whether or not this comic is good and what makes it good or bad. It usually has some sort of argument, which is, this is why this is bad, or this is why this is good, or this is what we can learn from this comic, or what we shouldn't learn from this comic. So there's usually another underlying argument beyond just telling the reader whether or not to read the comic.
I think that there's a little bit of, even in a sort of a negative viewpoint, there's still a bit of love that comes from that, right? You wouldn't spend that amount of time digging in and making an argument and bringing a point of view on something that you hadn't given your time and attention to. I'm specifically thinking from your first issue about Dave Baker writing about John Byrne, right? I wouldn't say it's a glowing, this is some of the best work of his career, but there was an obvious love of his career and of his ability that went into this criticism, right? And I think that there is definitely some amount of, I don't know, there's some positivity to it, even if it's negative, I guess is where I'm trying to get to.
That to me, I think, is the nuance that most people don't get, which is like the best thing a critic can give something is their attention and their work. And people don't necessarily consider that as a good thing when it's like a net negative, I think. But I agree with you very much.
It's got to be tough. I mean, I've put a lot of creative work out into the world, but never as the creator, And so when people are negative about my work, it's usually, it wasn't for you. That's totally fine. But I can only imagine if that level of intimacy from the creator side, it's got to be difficult to separate. This is not for you. That's okay.
Sure.
It's just for the next person. All right, getting more concrete then. You chose a physical tabloid-sized newspaper in what is an online world. What would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of that versus all of the rest of the digital-only criticism you've done?
Sure, I think the advantages are that when people are reading it. Like you can't like go to another tab. When you're reading a newspaper, like you're sitting there, you have the paper in your hands. The disadvantage is like people have to carry it around if they're going to read it, or like maybe people just don't read it. They put it in the middle of the to be read pile and it never gets read. But that's just life too. And that happens with websites. Disadvantage is probably shipping. Like I have to mail all these packages and that's a lot of work. But I can't think of any, I guess like space as well. Like space costs money, pages cost money. Like if I want extra pages, that like I used to publish solely online. And so if writers wanted to go over and wanted an extra 500 words, I could give that to them, no problem. I can't on a newspaper because there's only so many pages. So stuff like that, the constraints of the medium. But beyond that, it's all been great.
I'm curious, what are the constraints that you have to? What are your current constraints for your contributors?
So mostly word count and a deadline. I don't assign pieces. I let people pitch what they want to write, which is one of the benefits of being separated from the publishing cycle. I get to let people write about that, like Dave Baker's piece. Like who else right now would publish that piece. I'm sure people would, but it's harder to get that published because it's not tied to the new edition, right? Or it didn't just come out.
Yeah.
So giving writers the opportunity to write about that one thing that's kind of been on their mind for a decade, to me is a gift, because that's the kind of writing I like to write and is hard to support when you're running something off of ads and clicks, just because that money's hard to get. And the Kickstarter, with people kind of giving direct money, we're able to be much more flexible and free with like what the content of the paper is. But yeah, the constraints are literally, I give them word count and a deadline and I say go.
What's the top end word count right now?
So for the features, it's 1,200 words.
1,200. Excellent. And then are you filling in? You having to do like smaller, like 500 count?
Yes. So the reviews are 500 words and then the features are 12. And then we just kind of like fit them into the paper as they do.
So this has all been funded by your Kickstarter. And I want to get a little more into the Kickstarter-ness of this, because you've now done several successful campaigns, and that's always notable. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So when you're looking at the performance and, the follow-up campaigns, what did you learn about, say, pricing and reward design and print runs, that those who are kind of coming in after you? What were the big lessons for you?
Well, first, I was very lucky when I was starting that I have wonderful friends who have done Kickstarters. So I got to sit down with David Hyde and Kat Kalamia and Brittany Matter, and they just told me, like, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong, with my drafts, and then kind of gave me an idea of what is going to work and what's not. One thing that people might have noticed but may not have fully noticed is that the first two campaigns had 3 prints in our print bundle, and then this most recent campaign has the one print option, a tarot card option, and the stretch goal option, which comes with everybody's physical packages. But that was because while the first campaign did really well and could support those 3 print artists, like the second one couldn't. And I was like, well, if we're heading that way, like the third one probably won't either. And so we scaled back a little. And that's just kind of, regular business adjusting. And it was like partially just because also the individual prints weren't doing as well as we had hoped to like kind of support that ecosystem. And so we switched tack. And then with this one, we have, like, I'm trying to mix up the rewards as well. Like, we have a bookmark on this one, and then we have the critics catalog, which originally, when I launched the newspaper, I really wanted to do a reporter's notebook, because I've been a reporter here and there, and I think I love the aesthetic. I think it's so cool, and people really liked it. The last one we did pencils, and this one I was like, I want to do something vintagey too.
Right.
Couldn't figure out what it was going to be, and then I was like, Scholastic catalog, but for critics.
Yeah.
And that's been such a joy to work on as well, because I get to reach out to people whose work I really admire, and then friends and stuff, and say, hey, send me a blurb. We're going to put it in this thing, and let's make this happen, and hopefully get more eyeballs on your stuff, because the people who are reading the Courier are the people who are interested in comics criticism. So if we can share that audience, and help the audience find other stuff they might like that's the goal, right? And so that's been really cool to do as well. But it's all about just shifting, because the cool thing with Kickstarter is you have very immediate data. And it's very accurate. Like, you can see immediately what the audience wants and what they don't want. And you can shift immediately for your next campaign. Also, the benefit of being like kind of a one-man band is like, I look at something, I'm like, okay, well, gonna change it next time. And I don't have to go ask anyone for permission.
From your vantage point, what skills have we figured out how to monetize in comics media? And what skills have been crucial, but we still haven't they're still financially undervalued, right? We haven't figured out how to find a model around these things that we absolutely need.
Sure. This is going to sound super harsh.
Let's go.
We haven't nobody's figured out a way to monetize things properly.
Yeah.
Nobody's being paid what they need to be paid. right now, I don't know, there's like 3 people doing this full time. I'm certainly not. And that's not because of lack of, not on my side, but on everybody's side. It's not because of a lack of talent or ability. It's just that there's not a huge readership. We feel like comics is the world because it's our world,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's not that big. Like comics criticism readership is not huge. It's not big enough to financially support comics critics. And then also the world devalues artists and the world devalues criticism and all of that other stuff. And the internet economy has exploded and all of that other stuff too. But pretty much nobody is able to. And that's a bummer. But I try to say that as much as I can because I know there's some 19-year-old out there who's just like, this is amazing. I want to do this. And I want them to do it too, but I want them to do it and know what they're getting into. And I think the more honest we can be about that, about rates, like the Comics Courier, we pay like $100 for a feature, which gets bumped to $150 with the stretch, and then $50 for the reviews, which gets bumped to $75 for the stretch. And that is a good rate for comics criticism, but that's not a living wage. And that in any industry, like you get paid more for movie reviews usually if you can find your way into that. But even it's not like it's not like there's a bunch of film critics doing it full time either, right? It's just we've kind of passed that time in our world, which is a bummer. But that's also, in my opinion, why it's so important for people to support the places they read. Because like if people will often think, well, it's my like $10, what's that going to do? Right. But for a website that like is run by some person who's not making any money and is paying, I don't know, $20 a piece to their writers, which is great because they're paying your $10 can support half a piece, right?
Yeah.
So the more individuals can give even tiny amounts of money to the places that they're reading, the more people will be able to be paid to do this work. But nobody's going to be able to pay, or not nobody, but no more than like 5 or 10 people are going to be able to do it full time.
So what does sustainable money in, let's say, comics writing, criticism, let's put it all under one roof, like reviews. What does, in practical terms, what's sort of a revenue mix for a writer, a critic, or anybody who wants to write about comics? What is that? Is it freelancing, crowdfunding, subscriptions, teaching? What does that mix look like for somebody who wants to enter this field?
For me, it's okay. To be purely honest, like I don't rely on this money at all. Like if I get annoyed when people don't pay me on time, but someone is literally 8 months late on a check right now. But that doesn't affect my life. And I would not be doing this if it did, because I don't think that's healthy. Like I think you should get a stable job first, whether that's if you can support yourself on being a barista or whatever it is, and then slowly build your comic stuff on the side. Like I was slowly building it when I was in college, right? Right. I was also working other jobs, but like this was like what I was doing in college and in grad school. I didn't like quit my job and say I'm gonna be a comics critic, because I would have, like, if I didn't have backup, I would have starved, because you do. And I make more than I used to. And I was working at Poppers where I was doing it full time. But like, it's just not doable for virtually anyone. I know David Harper's doing his subscription now, and he's going full time, which is great. And I hope that he's able to do it for the rest of his life, because he does amazing work. And I hope that anyone who's able to do it is able to do it for the rest of their life, because it's amazing work. But the true thing is, it's just the way to do comics criticism and be financially stable is to be financially stable first and then do comics criticism.
Yeah. I can see that. One of the things I think a lot about is, for obvious reasons, but and really what led to the magazine, you and I have discussed this before, is that there is not a single outlet for promotion, right? We haven't really, we lost the ability for even a single website to become that sort of outlet for publishers to promote, and for writers to write, and for fans to discover. Like it's just become so decentralized that there is no spot that is supporting anybody.
Yeah.
right? Even the publishers who need to promote, right? That's it's become the real challenge. So I think, but part of the problem that we have from where I sit is that it's really difficult to create a measurable value, right? That good criticism or review or that sort of thing brings, because then you can't just say, well, if you pay X in advertising, you're going to get Y back in attention or whatever. So I would love to hear about what you think of that as what is that? Is there a measurable value for what you do to somebody who's publishing or creating, and how should they be thinking about that, and as a reason to be contributing? Because right now what you're talking about is fans contributing, but to my mind it's as much about using marketing dollars as anything else.
Yeah,
Right?
I'd love marketing dollars. Love more sponsors. That'd be great. We don't sell ads on the Courier, but we would love more sponsors that are publishers. We have some, which has been great. But the ad to me is people, first of all, rising tide. More people who are engaging in comics in a deep way. Not to sound like mean, it means more money is being spent in the industry, right? And that's a good thing. Like if people read about a cool IDW book in the Courier, they're going to be like, hey, maybe I should buy this cool IDW book. And the more people, people know about this now because they talk about this on social media, which is like the more buzz that gets built. But criticism, at least for me, I know not everybody feels this way. It's buzz with weight, right? It's not just some guy saying that blah, 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 blah. It's someone who has trained in this field and knows what they're talking about and is being paid to write something telling you, hey, this book is good or bad or interesting in this way, or the art is really cool. But there is a benefit because the more people who know about your stuff, the more likely there are going to be people who can be reading your stuff. And that's also how we learn about books now. Like we don't have, you were talking about earlier, there's no centralized place to promote. We don't have comics Twitter anymore. Comics Twitter is dead. Yeah. And so how do we find out about the stuff? People have to talk about it on their sites or their newspapers or on Blue Sky or wherever people are. And enough people do, like, let's say 5 people you trust mention the book. You're like, okay, this is going on my to be read pile.
100%. It does make sense. I mean, you do have to hit people, what is it, 10 times on average. Yeah. They have to have 10 positive impressions, or at least impressions of something before they, seek it out, generally speaking. And so you being the first of those is always of value. All right, so let's talk about, I wanted to, a lot of the conversation that we have on this channel and in our live show and such is working directly with comics retailers. Have you, are any of them carrying Comics Courier, and how has that relationship been?
Yeah, not like, it's been great. We have a tier on the Kickstarter, so retailers can order through there. I also cold emailed like 100, 200 shops. And people, it's not a ton of shops, but like a good handful, and people have been really lovely about it and really supportive. It's been that to me is really satisfying too, because again, that's an avenue where people who have never heard of me or the Courier can find the Courier, and because it looks kind of different, you're imagining like you walk into a comic shop and you're like, hey, what's that thing? Because it looks so different. So hopefully that's been doing well. I've had a couple people do second orders, which has been nice because it's like, okay, well, it's sold out, so that's good. But it's really cool because number one, I love comic shops. I think they're a really important part of the industry, but also like it does feel like people are showing up to support the paper, which is really nice.
Have you gotten a feeling for who the reader, the Comics Courier reader is? Is it other critics? I mean, obviously, it's no longer just your friends that you can guilt into it.
I thought it would be mostly critics, honestly, but there's a lot of people who aren't critics, and there's a lot of people who are not my immediate idea of the comic fan that would normally read this stuff. Like, I've had a lot of older fans who like, I think we're kind of brought in with the newspaper idea where they're like, I've had a lot of people like say, hey, I really miss Wizard, or like, which is wild because the tones are absolutely different, right? But it's still the same idea of it's a physical thing that you can read and talks about comics. So even like that huge gap, people are passing that gap just to be like, oh yeah, it's a physical media I can buy, and read about this medium that I love. So that's been really interesting. It's just all different types of fans that I would normally, we kind of get insular, I think, in the industry. Like, we go to the same places, we're at the same conventions, we talk to the same people. And like, it's not super often that I meet a random comics fan who isn't also kind of a semi-professional, I guess. And being able to see people who are just comics fans read it is really interesting, because this is definitely, of course, for them. But I didn't know if I'd be able to reach them, just because the internet is broken up, and who knows how anyone finds anything these days. Yeah.
No one knows. No one knows anything.
Exactly.
And everybody who tells you they do, you dig deeper and they realize that nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
We're all just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something will stick.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So I'd love to talk to you about, you've been at this a while as an editor and as a writer. I'd love to talk to you about your relationship with the freelancers that you work with, both through this and other projects. When you are, say you're commissioning pieces, getting those pitches in, what are the factors that go into that? Is it into a go, no go for them? Like, is it your editorial vision? This sounds great, but we don't have enough space for it, or what? If you can get that done in the next 3 days, that's it. Like, what are the considerations for saying yes to a piece?
Sure. I mean, I'll speak to the Courier first, because it's so unique in the projects that I work on, which is, so the Courier, I reach out to the writers. So far, it's been different writers every issue. I want to do that for as long as I can, just to get as many people involved as I can. And it's almost always go. The only time it's a no-go is if someone else is writing about the book, or if I think the person's scope is wrong, which is also true about most editorial work, which is as a writer, which is great because I can understand on the other side, it's hard to tell scope sometimes, where you think this is like a 3,000 word essay, but it's actually like a 400 word essay, or like you think it's 500 words, but it's actually like a book. You see this especially with young writers. They come and they pitch an essay, and you're like, you could not fit this into an essay. Like, you just don't have that sense yet. Like, that comes with experience, and even with experience, you're sometimes off. So those are my two big edits, which is no, someone else is writing about it, or someone else is writing about like you want to write about Spider-Man issue 3, and someone's doing Spider-Man issue 4. That's a little too close for me.
Sure.
And the other thing is, you've got to narrow your scope, or you have to widen your scopes. But that's just for the Courier, and that's just because I have full editorial control. In a different place where, let's say you might be driven more by clicks, you got to think about the clicks, right? Yeah. Is this going to be interesting to a reader right now? Which is this in the conversation? Is this the hot topic? Is this tied to a big anniversary? And these are things I have to think about as a freelancer too. When I love writing about classic film. I'm trying to pitch an article by His Girl Friday, and I'm tying it to a big anniversary because that's how you get these pieces sold. Because who else is going to publish my piece about His Girl Friday?
Yeah, right.
No one. So, which is cool about the Courier, because I'm able to do that for other people.
Because you are the one.
Because
I'm going to be the one spot that gets to talk about His Girl Friday.
Exactly. But as an editor, on a site that has traffic considerations, you have to think about traffic considerations. You have to think about how you're going to make the money to run the site, right? I think people treat that stuff like, oh, it's so nefarious, and it really isn't. Editors don't just want to publish the hot topics necessarily. It's just editors want their business ventures to be a success, right?
Yeah.
That's all we all want. And the Courier's small enough and separated enough that I can do what I want. But if I was trying to run a full-time staff, I couldn't do this. This would be nuts. No, everybody would lose their jobs in 3 months. It would be done. And so as an editor for other places, you got to think about that stuff. You also have to think about is this writer able to do what they're saying? Are they able to get it in on time? Mm-hmm. Are they reliable? Those are really present questions that people don't often think about when we're talking about criticism, which is what happens if this person doesn't get it in on time? Now that really timely review is 2 months out of date and completely useless to me. It might be really beautifully written, but it's not going to garner the clicks it needs to pay for the piece.
Right.
So that's the stuff that I keep in mind. But really, scope to me is usually the number one determiner of the immediate yes or no.
I've been blessed to work with people who are very driven and a very specific point of view for the artistic point of view. And I've also been blessed to work with people that are just trying to make as something as good as it can be, knowing that, there are limitations. Can you talk about like what is that emotional labor of working with these writers like? Because this is a new place for me. Most of my day-to-day is making narratives. It's you're coming at a different place.
It's not that different, which is it's all about the relationship. Like if I've worked with someone for 5 years, I'm like, take out this paragraph. It's not working. And if this is the first time I'm working with someone, I'm going to talk around that. If I'm editing someone for the first time, I'm not going to suggest deleting an entire paragraph. I'm going to say, hey, this sentence isn't really working, or this may not be as relevant to your piece, blah, 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 and hope that they can slowly figure that out for themselves. So there is a lot of hand-holding, not in a negative way, but just because we don't trust each other yet, right? Like this person is like, well, who's this asshole telling me what to do, telling me to delete my writing? Whereas like over time, you build this trust, which is like, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not telling you your idea is bad. My job as an editor is to help you say your message as clearly as possible in a way that the reader will find both engaging and understandable. And I'm going to have to mess things around to do that. Like nobody is born out of the womb perfect, right? Like my pieces aren't perfect either. I get edited. And so that's just part of writing, and that's just part of editing. And for me, it's the most satisfying part of my courier work is being able to work with writers. It's part of why I started the courier, because leaving Popverse, I miss working with writers. I really love the editing process, and I really love it's not like criticism in any way because the work is different, but it's the same analytical mode in a way where you're kind of looking at the pieces of the puzzle. But the cool part about the editing part is you're actually part of the creative process. Like, I don't think of, like, some people are like, oh, reviews make writers better. I'm like, I'm not thinking about the writer when I'm writing a review. I'm thinking about the audience. That is it. I don't care about the writer. But in this case, I do care about the writer because I'm in on this process and I'm helping them shape the piece. And so there is a bit of emotional labor involved, but that's just part of working with people and building relationships. And I think that's a good thing.
It occurs to me, I have a little digression that I wasn't sure we were going to get to, but this feels like a good spot for it. You're working with a lot of younger writers, but in the different places that you are. You came at this during a time and place where, comics criticism, comics writing was something you could do full time. It could be a real job. And as you're saying, right now it's a big struggle to try and piece that together. If you're talking to somebody young who is just trying to enter this space, they really do feel passionate about wanting to write about comics. What are your recommendations for them?
Sure. I think starting out, having newsletter is great, but what's going to get people to read your stuff is getting published in other places because they're reading those places. They're not reading your newspaper because they don't know who you are yet. Yeah. First of all, this is a wide open offer to everyone. My email inbox is open. And I'm always happy to give notes on a pitch, not for forever. Like, I'll take a look at a couple pitches. I'm not reading all your pitches for forever. Or a piece, again, not for forever, but I'll take a look at one or two of your pieces. And because starting out, people were supportive and people were helpful and people were nice. But I had no idea what I was doing. And it took me a lot longer than it should have for me to really get started. And I'd love to help people because that was tough. And I think reading the places, reading a bunch of stuff in the places that you like to read. I don't think you can write comics criticism without having at least an understanding of what other people are doing in the space. Mm-hmm. You got to read a lot of comics, obviously, and then just start writing. And hopefully, as you publish in places, the editors there will start to guide you and you will get better over time, right? I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to be ready or to be good when they're starting out. And the only way you get good is to have reps. And you can't do reps if you're not doing stuff and you're not getting edited and you're not getting feedback. There may be editors who just tell you you're not ready, and then you just go and you read and you work more. And then maybe you have friends look over your stuff. But you got to start writing like immediately, because if you don't, you'll scare yourself out of it and you'll never do it.
You can't wait for approval. You need to be writing, right? That is something that I, end up having to preach to a lot, especially younger comics creators who want to like self-publish and that sort of thing, or they want to get published. My answer to them is always just start. Just start. Just make stuff and put it out there, and you're not going to get paid for most of it. Most of it is that it's just going to be about you working on who your voice is, right? And you're right. You don't get there without that work. It's impossible. All right. Well, I'm going to talk. It's a good place to pivot to talk about sort of our larger ecosystem. Let's say I'm a creator. I'm one of those creators. I'm putting books out. What are the biggest misunderstandings you think creators have about getting coverage, right? Getting reviews and that sort of thing. Where should they begin in trying to get that sort of attention?
Ooh, tough question. I think the big misunderstanding is a lot of creators think that critics are being paid when the majority of critics are not being paid. And they can be kind of demanding, and they're like, well, why don't you write about this book? And it's like, well, because most people are doing this after their 9 to 6 job at night, and they might have a couple kids that they have to hang out with too. And so there's never going to be enough coverage to go around. I think the best way to get coverage is, this is going to sound really dumb and mean, but to make interesting work that is a little different from what other people are doing.
How about you make something I want to write about? Yes, how about that?
Exactly. That sounds so mean, but also learn what critics cover, the kind of stuff that you write, and then you can build a relationship with them as well, because the most annoying stuff is like when you get all these emails for stuff that you would never cover in a million years. Or like stuff that you've never covered before, and it's like, well, why are you sending this to me? This is totally not my beat, or everybody has their own interests, right? And so I think that, and then just finding those little spaces, like if someone has a fun interest, like, guess what? I'm getting pitched baseball comics now for the baseball site, and like someone's found out my niche interest, and then obviously I'm going to say yes because I want more stuff for the baseball site.
Right.
So like there's interesting ways to get coverage, to pivot a little. If you can find like that one weird thing about your book, and maybe find a blog that's not in the comic sphere about that too. Like maybe your main character is an engineer, and maybe an engineer blog might want to cover that. So kind of think outside of the box a little, because for the comics beat, I don't mean specifically the comics beat, they're getting like hundreds of pitches a day. So like to get your thing into the beat, that's going to be kind of hard. But how many like engineering blogs are getting engineering comics pitched to them? So that might be an easier way to do it as well. But definitely just like the big thing is just don't feel entitled to coverage. Like it's just so frustrating sometimes. It's just, I think people do feel entitled to coverage. And I'm just like, look at these look at these people who are doing the work. And I see them at conventions, these writers who are literally not getting paid anything. If they're getting paid like $5 an article.
Yeah.
And I see them working. They're out and they're working, and they're like reporting, and they're doing this and that. And I'm like, wow, that is so incredible that these people are just doing this, and they're losing money because, you got to pay for your hotel room or whatever. They're losing money to do this as an act of service for something that they love. And it's not like comics creators are making a ton of money too. Like I know that. But oftentimes they are getting paid something. And for comics creators to kind of go and like shit on this whole group of often young people, because they're the ones who have time, who are doing this out of the love of the game
Yeah.
is really disheartening. And I've seen it for a decade, and it doesn't really change.
Well, I think there's always an othering, you know. There is always this this belief that they have it easier than me because you don't
Yeah.
see how hard this is. And I think it's always a good place to begin that everything is harder. It's just as hard as your piece of it. Like
Yeah.
everything is just as hard. There is no easy path.
Sure.
You know. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Well, so I'm curious to know you keep a broad eye on on our space, and obviously we talked about comics Twitter is no longer a thing. Blue Sky just feels weird to me. I don't know. I don't know if I understand it. It doesn't feel like it's a productive place to me, but I could be wrong. I'm curious to know where you think the experiments are. Like where obviously a print magazine, a print newspaper is an experiment. There's no question at all. Are there other similar experiments that other people are doing that are worth a view and maybe would, if with success, be adding to this ecosystem of ours?
I think there's a lot of really great podcasts out there that are covering comics of many different types, that are interviewing creators, that are doing reviews. I think that's really amazing.
Any favorites?
Like my friends do My Marvelous Year, which they do they're reading through all decades of Marvel, and it's quite funny. So it's not necessarily
Yeah.
They're a hoot. Obviously comic book couples counseling is super fun. I was just on this podcast called Comic Sans. I don't think it's out yet. But they were really sharp with their questions, and they cover it. I think the whole thing is they have a guest on and they talk about a comic, and then afterwards they interview the guest, and that was really cool. But there's a ton of really amazing people doing good stuff. Obviously there's a bunch of websites doing good stuff. Obviously there's The Beat, David Harper I mentioned earlier, Steve Morse's Shelf Dust. People are doing good work. It's just hard to wade through it, I think, just because there's so much stuff online. And the cool thing about Twitter that Blue Sky doesn't have is an algorithm. I know people talk about Blue Sky not having an algorithm as a good thing, but I think it means that things like the things that need to pop aren't popping because they're not getting pushed up. And I think that's what's missing. Is it's not necessarily curators, although curators, I'm very much a believer in curators, but it's a place for everyone to know what's buzzy. Like where's the place where everybody knows that this is the hot book that people are talking about today? That's what's missing.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is no I go back to this interview. I don't know why. Every time we start talking about comics journalism, and especially even, I mean, this is going to sound a weird connection, but digital comics specifically, I go back to this interview, long form interview that Gary Groth interviewed. Understanding Comics. Scott McCloud. And Scott was outlining this had to have been the mid to late 90s when we were talking about this. And the idea of incremental payments. Why would anybody want to put $1 on their credit card? That doesn't make any sense, right? Was just mind-blowing to them at the time. But one of the things that Gary said was, I use my comic shop to decide what it is I'm interested in, right? I go to the comic shop and I see what's there, and that's part of that. How do you even discover this stuff? And Scott's position was, well, there will be curators. And then for a while there were blogs, and there were websites that had a lot of comics criticism and a lot of promotion and that sort of thing. There was that curation, and now you're right. There is no one kind of spot where you can even discover this. I remember Jim Rugg recently was talking about how there's no way there was a time where I felt like I knew what comics was. Mm-hmm. And now it's just impossible for me to even get my hands around it because there'll be something that's been running for 5-10 years I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't seem fair.
It's rough because there was always there's so many comics, but now it's this comic that I'm a fan of has been back off hiatus for a year and I never found out. Like that used to be
Yeah.
information that you would get through Twitter or whatever, through the hive mind, is like, oh, this book is back. Or like, oh, these creators that I follow. I'm like the biggest Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips fan. And this last book, like I saw nothing. It just, like I saw it in the store and I was like, when did that come out?
I did the
Like,
same thing, and we talked through
Exactly.
DCN and now Comics Magazine. We keep tabs on them, and I just bought it last night. I'm like, when did this happen? I had the same
Exactly. And
experience.
that's not what's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
We are their audience. We are the repeated audience. Like we should know and we don't. And that to me is the big concerning issue, because it's not about the lack of readership now. It's about the lack of contacting the readership about information. Kieran Gillen's been writing about this in his newsletter, which is just, I think with the launch of the Power Fantasy, he was just like, my regular readers have no place to find out that Avenue book. Like that's a problem.
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, obviously, you and I are both working on different projects to try and help with that. But man, I don't even know how you wrap your hands around what is comics and what is good comics, right? What
Yeah.
is the if you wanted to buy the 10 best things that happened last month, where would you go for that list?
There's no list. Luckily there's great year-end lists. David Harper, I mentioned. Dave Busing, who does Comic Book Herald and My Marvelous Year, he also has a great year-end list. And it's great because they both have very varied tastes. So you'll have like kids comics and manga and whatever on it. But there's no one's doing the top 10 comics of this month. Like, I mean, and not in a way that I'm sure someone.
Well, Harper does something. Here are the 5 things that I'm most interested in this week. He does that kind of stuff.
But that's not necessarily always books. Like we need someone to say these are the top 10 books that everyone's going to be talking about. And I know you're obviously working on something like that. But it is severely lacking. And it's something we have both been working on parallel things.
Yeah.
And like just because I think we're both responding to this big gap
Yeah.
of just what this fracturing of the pipeline of information that is really dangerous for everyone, and everyone feels it economically, I think, as well. And in an economic downturn is like extra bad.
Although luckily, so far, our comics shops seem to be doing well inside of this this economic crisis that we're all living through in real time. All right, I'd love to talk about you a little bit about your personal workflow and how you focus in on it. Obviously, you said your December is quiet, so you're packing boxes, and it's wonderful to have that moment to pack boxes.
Yeah, it is. If I was full load working, I would be losing it right now.
Oh, I feel you. Let me tell you. Let's talk about how your kind of framework you use for deciding what new projects or new roles or any of those things. What are the factors that go into that? I mean, financially, creatively, like what makes you decide that this is the next thing I'm going to be working on?
I don't rely on this money, and so it's almost all creative except for if the money's really good. Then I'll go for the money. But it's almost all creative, and it's almost all in comics. It's a little different because comics, like I've been around enough that like I can, if I really want to write about something, someone will publish it.
Yeah,
Probably.
Yeah.
In my other work where it's like if I'm writing about film or TV, like that's based on if editors want to publish my piece, and so that's very much where the complications of freelance life comes in, which is 1 month I'll send out 20 pitches and I'll get 6 yeses, and 1 month I'll send out 20 pitches and I'll get 0 yeses. And you kind of have to go with the pacing of the work, which means sometimes you're extraordinarily busy and sometimes you have nothing to do, which can be stressful. And again, why I don't recommend to anyone who doesn't have either outside financial support or other jobs to try to make it as a freelancer, especially now, where freelance jobs, like freelance work it's like half of what was available 5 years ago, just because everything's kind of disappeared. But so that kind of goes
Even
into
5 years ago.
Even 5 years ago. Wow. Like before, I was getting more yeses at bigger publications before I started at Popverse than after. And it's not because poppers ruined my reputation. Like, you would think that I would be able to have more just because I've met more people. I have more bylines. But the industry, like, film websites are gone. Like, or they're not hiring as many freelancers. It's just completely decimated. And everyone can, I think it's not just in pop culture. I think it's freelance writing everywhere. So that's rough. But that's kind of how I decide my work. I also teach as well. So you kind of jigsaw everything in to make it fit. I do the baseball stuff, but that's all for free. So I try to make that fit as well. And yeah, like it's all about kind of, I think people underestimate how much of writing, even not freelance writing, is about understanding your own ability to be productive. Like, everybody's different. And I have like ADHD, like I'm diagnosed ADHD. And so like I have so many tips and tricks to like trick myself into working because I am like a naturally lazy person and I have to get a lot done.
We need to dig in here because I can tell you, as somebody, I have undiagnosed ADHD, but it's pretty obvious to anybody who sees my workload in any given day, the things I say yes to, which is too many. And there are days when I just like, I think there's an overwhelm, that happens where I just don't. It's all stuff I want to work on. It's all stuff I'm excited by, but I sit down and my brain just won't brain.
Yes. Well, I have a tip for that because I have a tip for everything. My tip for that is you're probably putting the project down on your to-do list, like finish this or do this, as opposed to the individual task, like send this specific email.
Interesting.
And so the overwhelm is probably coming from like you're thinking, oh my God, this huge project, as opposed to like, I just need to send this email and then wait for them to respond, or I just need to write this 2-paragraph blurb. And if you see 2-paragraph blurb, that feels much more doable than work on project. So that it's all about lying to yourself is what I've learned. And I have like really complex systems, whereas like I'm very specific on to-do lists, and I have like stupid little tricks, which is like I will count. I'll be like, I'm counting back from 10, and within 10 seconds, this email will probably be done, right? And so instead of sitting and thinking, oh, it's annoying to send an email, I just start counting back from 10, or I'll hold my breath. This is a new one. I'll hold my breath and I'll say, I'm going to get the email done before like I need to breathe. And then you can't delay because you're holding your breath now. You're like forcing yourself to do it. And like I have to rely on tips like this and tricks like this, because if not, like I would sit around and do nothing for forever. Because that's just my natural state. And there's so many things I want to do, right? And so like I trick myself into working all the time.
Yeah, well, as someone who does work all the time and needs those tricks, because there are just days that I will sit and look at the screen. This is overshare. But there's days I'll just sit and look at the screen and nothing has happened.
I get it.
It's been 45 minutes and I'm like, where did I lose this 45 minutes? Nothing has happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that so hard. But man, holding my breath, that's really good.
It works. It works.
That is so good. Oh, now I got to figure out what the reverse of that is when I'm actually having to do like an introduction or something, record something. Because,
it could be like hold your breath until the mic starts or something. Right. Yeah.
You have to hold this heavy weight up until it is done. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's really good. All right, I'm using that one. All right, I want to return. We started off with baseball, and I think because nobody has a website about baseball who doesn't absolutely. I mean, that you said you do for free or for pennies. That doesn't come from a love. Explain to me why baseball.
Why baseball? Okay, so 3 years ago, my dear friend Haas Otsmanelhau, the letterer, and now the designer of Panel by always the designer of Panel by Panel, now the designer of the Courier. He's very into American sports. Don't know why, because he's English. And he was like, we always like talk about, I kind of live in the part of Southern California where I'm 30 minutes from everything. Uh-huh. And he's just like, well, how far are you from Angel Stadium? And I'm like, about 30 minutes. And he's like, well, you've got to go see Shohei Ohtani pitch. And I'm like, who is Shohei Ohtani? Like, who is this guy? And he's like, well, it's like, he's really big deal. And I'm very much like, I'm a chaser of novelty. Like, I'll do anything once. I think new experiences are exciting and they fill the well, especially as a writer.
Oh, I'm with that.
And exactly, right? So I'm like, well, take my mom to a baseball game. I haven't been since I was a kid. My dad loved baseball. He took us when we were kids. We thought it was the most boring thing in the world, so he stopped taking us. He sold Dodger dogs when he was a teen, I think.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I went to a game and I was like, this is pretty good. Like I'll go to another one. This is a good time. And then like 6 months later, I was like full on jersey, hat, like going to and then soon you're like, well, how do I score keep? And then soon it's like, well, let me watch old games. And then soon it's like, well, let me start reading some books that I find in the thrift store. And then with my personality, it's like, well, I should start writing about it. I'm a person of many hobbies. Like I just started weaving and I spin yarn and stuff. And like you just get your world opens up.
Yeah.
Like my world has opened up because of baseball. Now I can have conversations with strangers about the game or whatever.
All right. Well, we talked about what baseball could learn from comics. What is it you think now that you're into it, what is it that comics is missing that baseball does really well?
I think that there's a lot of, I wish comics fans had more of a sense of history. And this sounds odd because comic fans obsess about history in a way, but they obsess about character history. They don't really obsess necessarily about like the history of the medium. And I think the history of the medium is so interesting. And like baseball history people are like, they're talking about like the kind of dirt that was on some obscure field that was an MLB official field like for one season, Their love of the nitty gritty is so deep. And you don't hear people talking about like what paper DC was using in the early 90s, right? Like fans don't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
We might.
We do.
Yeah. Yes. Or like stuff like that. Like you just don't hear it. And I wish that deep love for like the esoteric facts rolled over to comics fans instead of, I feel like a lot of the comics arguments are very samey. Yeah. We talk about this all the time. It's like every year we talk about writers versus artists. We talk about are critics bad, actually. We talk about like, I don't know what it is, but I had a running joke at Popverse, which is I had written up this big defense of critics article, which ended up being published as like a Ratatouille piece. And
what does that mean, a Ratatouille piece?
It was about Ratatouille.
Oh, okay.
Like the critic, like I framed it as like this was the critic in Ratatouille. I had that piece mostly written for like almost the entirety of my time at Popverse because like we just knew we were like just wait until the discourse comes back and we'll just publish it that day. And it's like it's so predictable that you can write your article, your like think piece ahead of time. Like that should not be it. People should be arguing. And not about Thor versus Silver Surfer. Like, they should be arguing about, like, who was the cooler inker of this era. And, like, that's, like, those fun details that, like, most comics fans don't get. That baseball fans, like, I'm writing about this group of Pittsburgh Pirates fans who meet every year to replay on the radio, like, their World Series win from, like, decades ago. So, like, most of these people were kids when this happened, and now they're, like, grandparents probably. And they sit there and listen on the radio, an old game of when the last time the Pirates won the World Series. And you don't have that in comics. Like, people love the characters, people love the movies, but there's not this, like, die-hard love for the history that I think that really attracts me to baseball because I find that stuff fascinating. But, like, there's that love that's just like, we will come and like, our team's been bad for however many years, but we will gather every year to remember the one time we won. And that's just, it's so, I mean, it's, how can you not be romantic about baseball? But like, we could be a little more romantic about the history of comics.
What does our future look like if things stay where they are? Right? So right this second, comics criticism doesn't really have a place. There's no really one place for promotion. All of the challenges you and I have mentioned. What does it look like if we don't see the changes? Like if the people like you don't show up and try new things?
Things will shrink. things will shrink. There'll be less money to go around, which is wild because there's already very little money to go around. Readership will shrink. The only kind of counterbalance to this is that we have a new generation of kids growing up who are raised on comics.
Yeah.
And the question is whether or not the direct market can get those kids, right? Because the book market will. Like, book market's not dumb. They may not be publishing popular graphic novels for adults yet, but when this YA like generation grows up, they certainly will, right? Like, they're going to be making that money. Can the direct market make their popular comics accessible to that group of people? That's kind of like, for me, the one hope of an expanding audience, because other than that, like, what's the mass readership for direct market comics? It's not enough to sustain the people who are working in it. And if it gets worse, it's only going to be worse, right? But if there's a way to tap into this new market, or, I mean, people talk about this all the time, though I know it's complicated, is the webtoon readers, right? It's different because it's mostly free, and those people are being paid pennies as well. But that is still a readership, and anyone who's reading in the medium is a potential audience, right? And, like, we know that even though it's free to read online, they're buying Lore Olympus hardcovers, right? We know this whole generation, they're buying special edition hardcovers of the books they like, which is, it's the TikTok book club thing with the painted edges or whatever. Is that something the direct market can do or appeal to? Obviously, there's a gender issue and a race issue, not only with the creators, but creators also impacts readership, right? If there aren't books that are targeting teenage girls, we're not going to get teenage girls buying books, and that affects the economy. Like, well,
they're going to be buying books. We saw that.
Yeah, it's like, are they going to buy these
They're going to go buy manga, right? They're going to go,
buy Lore Olympus or whatever.
Exactly.
But are they going to be buying direct market comics? And that's a market, and we're leaving these markets behind. And it's not smart, but, that's also the industry. Like, I've been doing this long enough to know that, and, we can try to change it. But, like, I don't have a big amount of hope on the gender thing in direct market comics necessarily. I just feel like I've seen enough to know what it is. It'd be great if it changed, and I think we'd all do our little parts, but whether or not anything actually changes, we'll see. But that's a market, and that's a paying market. Like, we know, it's a paying market because when you walk into Barnes & Noble, there's a book talk table.
Yeah.
And why aren't we reaching out to those readers? Because it's market. And that's just a question for the publishers, I guess. But again, like, are the publishers paying attention to teenage girls in a non-appropriate way? I'm sure they are, but, like, in an appropriate financial marketing way, I don't think they are. And I think that's kind of going to be the death of the industry. Comics as a medium isn't going to die. This part of the industry may live for many, many years, and I hope it does because I love it. Yeah. And all my friends are in it. But, like, I think there are many mistakes being made and that's not something I can change.
What gives you hope for the future of comics? What
gives me hope is that there's still people here. Like, I'm still here, even though I know what this is. It's, and I don't talk about gender a lot in the context of my career, but I've gotten off a lot easier than my colleagues who are women. And I don't know why. I think it might just be I have a serious face or something. But it's not been easy even still. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people be driven out by misbehavior and abuse. And that's been tough.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's still people around is a miracle. Like, it literally is a miracle, and it's a testament to how much people love this stuff and how much people want to do this stuff. And I wish they didn't have to deal with all this stuff to do this work. Yeah. And I wish everybody could be paid. We talked about that bit earlier, too. But I think it's just, like, when I mentioned this earlier, but when I'm at a convention, and I see like beat reporters, like for working for Heidi. I say working, but people aren't paid at the beat, or they're paid very little. When I see them running around to cover a panel on, Raina Telgemeier, or like, I don't know who it is, and they're doing their panel write-up in the press room. When I see that, like, that gives me hope, because I'm like, people still love it. And I never want to be jaded. And I'm jaded about a lot of things, but I never want to be bitter about this stuff. And it's difficult. But seeing that stuff, like, you do have that hope, and you do have a sense of this love that people have, and that they want to work in this industry, and that they want to cover it because they think that it's worth being covered, because it is. Like, there are books out there and they deserve coverage, and there are creators out there and they deserve coverage, and that people dedicate their time and their lives to it, to me, is very moving.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It thrills me every time, and it makes me work even harder to try and, make the healthier experience, a healthier industry for those people who are, so determined in every aspect of what we do. There's so many people who are willing to work for free for forever just because they can't step back from it, right? It's the beauty of it. At some point you get to the end, you've decided you don't want to work for free anymore, and maybe there's not enough paying work, or whatever. Maybe we're talking about Tiffany reaches the end of days. You want to look back. What sort of legacy would you like your work in, the work you've written, the work you've edited, the work you've produced? What sort of legacy would you like to leave on our industry?
As a critic, I want people to think my work is strong. Like, you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to have my taste, but if you think my work is rigorous, I think that's always, for me, when I'm working, that's, as a writer, I'm always pursuing rigor. Like, it has to work all the way down. Like, I can't be like making arguments that aren't backed up. And I often make arguments people won't agree with, right? I'm trying to think. I wrote like a essay about 12 Angry Men, where I was just like, the whole movie is ruined by the ending. And you know what? A lot of people hated that essay, but I still stand by it because I think it was rigorous. Like, I backed up my argument. As an editor and just someone like, I guess, a publisher, I care less about what people think about me as a person, and I care more about the impact I've had, I guess, which is, it would be great if I've mentored a good chunk of people into being able to do this. It would be good if I have helped people find readers, helped other websites stay alive, been an encouraging friend, I guess. Like, for me, being an editor, well, I love the actual work. Why I do it in comics in this world is because of the community and because I want to give to it. And I do this thing once a year. I do a mini grant for critics. And that is exactly the thought process behind it, which is, if I can I know how dark it is those first few years where no one's reading your work and it's so depressing and you feel like you'll never get anywhere. And if I can get like one person to, like, in that moment, just be like, oh, someone's read my work and thinks there's potential here. That's the kind of work I want to be doing as an editor.
All right. So what's your hottest take about comics?
My hottest take is that fans need to understand that nobody's trying to attack them as creators and publishers. They're not trying to ruin your favorite character. They're not out there. And they're also not responding to news stories a week ago, because comics aren't made that fast. And so maybe have some grace for these people who are making very little money. And hey, if they put out a mediocre comic, you don't have to buy it. You can go buy something else. There's always a good comic somewhere. But putting kind of the weight of your entire fandom on one person drawing a comic feels very intense, and maybe could be chilled out a bit.
You understood the brief. Oh, that's so good. Tiffany, is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think This was very comprehensive. Thank you. The questions were very interesting. I've never been asked about legacy. I don't even think I've thought about it.
Listen, I don't know if I'm going to have an answer when somebody asks me that.
Yeah.
So, I get it. But that's the goal, right? Is to dig a little deeper. Where can people find you? How would they? This is your CTA moment. What would you like folks to do?
Yes, I'm on Blue Sky, even though we talked about how people aren't on there. I am on there.
I'm on there. It's trash, but I'm there.
Yes,
Yeah.
my tag is at Exploding Arrow, and then I publish weekly on thefanfiles.com about baseball. There's a baseball comic article coming out like next week, so there's a crossover for you. And then the Comics Courier comes out twice a year. You can follow our Kickstarter at comicscourier.com. There's digital and physical copies on that will be available as well off the Kickstarter. But yeah, beyond just supporting me and my work, like go read a comics critic's work and then write a comment, because no one ever comments. It's only ever like mean comments, and no one's ever like, this was a nice, well thought out review. And like, go do that for your local critic, because they've been working a long time without feedback from fans.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on this, and thank you for doing the work, and keep it up. I'm looking forward to working on this together.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. That was Dave.